Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo. With your host, Patrick Moran.
All right, what is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. Today's episode is presented by Golf Dojo. Your space, your time, your game. Bring your game to Golf Dojo, Western New York's best indoor golf experience. Visit mygolfdojo.com. My name is Patrick Moran. Big thank you, as always, to everybody out there for watching and listening, following, subscribing. I do appreciate y'all very, very much. Quick programming note, Wednesday night, live Imperial Pizza. I'm going to be with Andy Young from Spectrum Buffalo. We're going to sit down, talk Bills, get to know about Andy, his life, his career. I've actually never had him on the show before, so very much looking forward to doing that. That's going to be, again, Wednesday night, 8 p.m. live from Imperial. If you happen to be in the area, make sure you stop through, come say hello to Andy and myself. As for today, man, we're recording this Monday around supper time-ish, and a lot of news to get to today. And I am joined by my good friend, Joe Miller, Overreaction Buffalo. Getting used to saying that, Overreaction Buffalo, man. One of my good buddies here in the podcasting business, the voice, Joe Miller. What's going on, buddy? How you doing?
What is going on, Pat? I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. Let's be Bills fans for a second before we become podcasters.
IR one.
IR one as well. We're going to talk today. All right. So I sent you an outline. And again, we're recording this mid or late day, I should say, on Monday. 10 Buffalo Bills players who I feel firmly are on this roster bubble right now. And for the most part, I still feel that way. We're going to kind of talk our way through this exercise on this episode. But there was some injury news, I would say pretty significant injury news on the Buffalo Bills front from Sean McDermott earlier in the afternoon on Monday that I feel like in some cases might throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into these 10 players that I initially had listed. I said, let's be a Bills fan for a minute before we jump into this podcast and start getting objective and as unbiased as realistically that we're able to. I am officially, if I wasn't already, and I am a known knee-jerk reactor. I overreacted.
An overreactor? Are you an overreactor?
I am an overreactor, so it's only fitting that I would have somebody on from Overreaction Buffalo here.
You are the reason that I named my show what I did. That's exactly right.
Well, I got it from Nate Gary. I learned this from Nate Gary. I am the ultimate overreactor, but I got to be honest with you. Between the Matt Milano stuff, just some things that I've seen throughout the summer, and I know it's just camp, I know it's just preseason, but I haven't loved it. And then just a rash of not season-ending or even season-altering necessarily injuries, but a lot of more than just day-to-day stuff that's really going to affect the makeup of this roster, at least early on in the season. I'm concerned. I am worried right now as a fan of the Buffalo Bills. Are you there yet right now? Because it feels like a polarizing topic, man. People agreeing, people thinking the complete opposite, that, again, just overreacting, talking me off the edge a little bit, but how are you feeling right now? Is there a concern level with these injuries and just some overall things about this team that has you a little bit worried?
Well, worried is the wrong word. I mean, there's a bunch, right? And it's not necessarily, in my opinion, from what I've seen, limited to just the Bills. So the soft tissue injuries, which is what we're talking about, first of all, are always better than broken legs, right? ACLs and like serious things. I think what we don't know is how many of these are potentially at this point what we would call precautionary, right? Curtis Samuel toe. It was never even brought up, and I think that's probably the most striking one is like toe, and then it's like, oh, it's a turf toe, and then it's like, well, that's what just pushed Chase Claypool off the roster. Overreact time, right? Oh my, like this is fine. Everything's burning around us, and I the question is could he have played Saturday if that was a real game? And I don't know that that's the part we know. And for them to come out and be like, oh, he's week to week, well, that's great. The season's 3 weeks away, right? So I'm not at the point of being concerned. There's concerning things here, like safety Mike Edwards, safety Cole Bishop, safety DeMar Hamlin, right? That's one of the biggest concerning like position groups we have. The amount of linebackers that are injured on this team. luckily, Buffalo Joe shows up, Joe Andreesson shows up, and it's the legend of Joe Andreesson if he continues the way that he's going, like Kiko Who at this point. But I would say that I'm not necessarily concerned. I think that there's a measure of these that are probably potentially, if they had to play Sunday, these guys would be playing.
Maybe a couple. My concerns go beyond injuries, though.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the injuries, though, because this was a significant Monday Sean McDermott presser because of injuries. We'll run through these, and then I kind of want to go through with you and get your opinions.
Yeah.
I'll come up with a list of 10 guys who I think are firmly on the Bills roster bubble. I do think today's report might change some of that, and we'll discuss that along the way as well. But in terms of significant injury, you always hope it means nothing in the regular season, because if he plays, that means something happened to Josh Allen.
Right.
But Mitch Trubisky has a knee injury. He's going to be out for a while, and the Bills already are looking into another quarterback. No idea who that ultimately may up being. You know what, too, Joe? I'm done with trying to guess, like coming up with things. Like when the Bills need a receiver, we're going through all these possibilities, and then they end up signing guys who hadn't really done anything in the NFL since like 2020.
Right.
We ran through this a couple weeks ago. And after Shane or Michelle got hurt, and it ended up being Ben DiNucci. You know what I mean? So I kind of given up. I want to say Ryan Tannehill. I want to say a bunch of names, but who the hell knows with the team? But anyway, Mr. Trubisky, a knee. He's out for multiple weeks. MVS, who we're going to talk about, because spoiler alert, he was already on my bubble list to begin with. Hurts his neck. Out multiple weeks. Quentin Morris, the tight end 3, who I think has had a good summer and looked good in the preseason as well. Bill's playing a lot of 2 tight end personnel. Shoulder injury. Those guys, Sean said on Monday, they're all out for multiple weeks. Then he went week to week with DeMar Hamlin, hamstring. Balen Spector just can't seem to get healthy, his calf. And Curtis Samuel, turf toe. For what it's worth, I've heard with Curtis Samuel that this could be at least a 2 to 3 week injury. But anyway, week to week. All bad news. Back on a limited basis is Cole Bishop and Mike Edwards at practice this week to do some individual stuff. But I've also heard that they're not really close to playing. Nick Morrow is going to be limited as well this week. Dude, that's just a lot of injuries I just threw at your face right now, and everyone out there and listening. To start your week, and not to mention Matt Milano.
Yeah. And you talked about just, the concerns and where they are. There's layers to this, right? So there's layers to the injury, then there's layers to the player, then there's layers to the position group, and then there's layers to obviously the start of the season. At the top, Mitch Trubisky, I'm the guy that put out there on Twitter, I think before anybody else, that I'm still unsettled on the backup quarterback situation in Buffalo, right? Yeah. So to me, I'm not saying that I don't want Mitch Trubisky here, and I'm not saying good that somebody's hurt, but the backup quarterback position in the NFL is an interesting one in general. So the Buffalo Bills have lived on this idea that we're just going to bring in a bunch of dudes that are dudes with Josh Allen, regardless of whether or not they can play. And they've got to be cheap. And right now the Bills are living in that space even more so because they can't afford as much as people want Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill is going to get $8 to $12 million to be a backup quarterback, and the Bills can't afford that. They just can't. That's effectively the going market for a guy that if he goes and plays is going to win you half the game he plays. So the Bills aren't in a position where they could potentially even go get a guy that's going to be more expensive than Ben DiNucci or somebody like that. Mitch Trubisky came on a dime because Mitch Trubisky washed out of yet another team after 2 years after getting unseated by Mason Rudolph, right? So which isn't great. It'll be interesting to see what the Bills do. So there's the schools of thought of cap. And then there's a school of thought that actually was interesting to me that came up today on WGR this morning, which was a lot of teams are living in that world of we just have dudes around our quarterback like the Bills do. And if tragedy strikes, then we go get a guy to start, right? So the Bills might be in that vein as well. They might be looking at, let's make the quarterback room comfortable. Guys that trust Josh Allen and Josh Allen trusts to speak to him and say, hey, you need to slide. Hey, you shouldn't be running. Hey, you need to run more. Hey, you did this wrong, whatever. And then if tragedy strikes, we'll go get a guy to replace Josh Allen if somebody's got to play for 6 weeks. As far as everybody else, the biggest concern that I have of this, the layers of these injuries, and I'm taking a lot of time, Pat, I'm sorry.
No, good, man. That's what we're here for.
Number one, how do you, I said last night on the Overreaction postgame show, how in the hell do you evaluate wide receivers when you don't have a quarterback to throw them to?
Right.
And that's one of the biggest position groups that we need evaluated, not safety and linebacker. And then you break into the safeties. These guys can't get on the football field. And it was great that Taylor Rapp started. They pulled him off the field in the joint practice against the Steelers. I was overwhelmingly relieved that he played in that football game. So he's not like obviously super hurt, but that's a big concern, that those safeties. And then the linebackers, you're just at this point hoping to God that Joe Andreesson shows up against the Carolina Panthers the way that he did against the Pittsburgh Steelers and is something. Because Jerry Ostrowski said on our show, and I created a reel for it, he said it last night on the show, that he is the only true Mike on this team behind Terrell Bernard. So if this kid can play, and my God, did he look like he can play football? Like, and I mean all the reactive stuff. They didn't game plan. He didn't know what was coming at him. He faced two different starting quarterbacks, and he was not swimming. Like he was more than fine for what he had to, like he wasn't in over his head, right? Which I think is the most intriguing part. And Quentin Morris is another conversation. So
yeah, definitely. Look, with Mr. Trubisky, I agree with you 100%. It's funny too, because before that game, I put out a tweet. I went through 31 other depth charts around the league, and I'm like, you know what? Mr. Trubisky as a QB2 is probably better than 70% of them, at least.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, then I started realizing, I realized it Saturday. I'm looking at his name and not the player anymore, because he's awful. Right. He was awful on Saturday. He was awful the week before against Chicago. And quite frankly, I went to 4 camp practices and I thought he was awful at every single practice that he's been at, to a point where I was thinking the same thing that you just talked about. How are you evaluating KJ Hamler and Shavers and Isabella and stuff like that when Mr. Trubisky's throwing him the football? Because it's just not online at all. So I don't know. I could easily see one of the members of the Josh's Boys Club ultimately coming back, whether it's Kyle Allen. He's not going to make the Steelers final roster. Matt Barkley, one of those, they're not going to be on a 53-man roster, so they would be easy to get back. But now those guys become a 2 if something happens to Josh. In terms of Joe Andreesson, let's kind of get into that, because he's one of my guys that I had 24 hours ago anyway on the 10-person roster bubble. Do you feel like right now he's an exception, like every year, without fail, at OTAs or training camp, there's always a really nice story. A kid who comes out of nowhere. Usually it's an undrafted free agent, or maybe it's a late round pick who just flat out plays better than the starters. Like Christian Benford, a former 6th-round pick. He earned a starting spot. But even if it's not to that extent, there's always somebody who has a really good camp, and you start thinking of him. He looks good in a preseason game. Then he kind of fade away, ends up getting cut or on a practice squad, and more times than not, you never hear from that player again. Joe Andreesson is like legitimately the ultimate Cinderella story right now. I mean, this is a kid born in Buffalo, Lancaster High School, UB. You all know all the details. Doesn't get drafted, doesn't get signed right after the draft either. Like, he's not even a priority undrafted free agent. The kid makes the 90-man roster, or gets a camp invite, I should say, based on a tryout.
A rookie mini camp invite.
A rookie mini camp, absolutely. So that was almost like a favor, as a UB kid, we'll give him a look.
Basically a walk-on.
I tried asking Joe from Queens this last night, and in Joe from Queens fashion, he just started ranting on me and never answered the question. What does that say about 32 teams? Because we'll include Buffalo right now, who, forget about drafting him. Maybe I get that, but there wasn't a team around the NFL that saw something on film with this kid to say, you know what, he's at least worth signing after the draft, and we'll get him in to camp this summer and see how he looks. That blows my mind. He's looked at camp, and then I still can't believe what I saw from him for the most part against Pittsburgh. Is this more than just a Hollywood story that's about to end? Like, it feels like this is a story that's potentially, wild as this seems, just beginning, man.
Yeah, it's Vince Papale 2.0, right? Is what we're talking about. And so, I mean, I don't know what the name of the movie is going to be when Disney cuts it in 25 years or 30 years, but it's an interesting story. I tried several ways after Saturday and watching this, because I'll be honest with you. There's only so much time in the day for working blokes like you and me to study the roster, get into who the players are. And coming into it, did I know Joe Andreesson existed? Yes. Coming into Saturday, did I know that he was from Buffalo and went to UB? Yes. And there was a measure of, so what? Cam Lewis went to UB and he was an undrafted rookie free agent. He's been on the roster for years. Like, Cam's a great story. So it was like, meh. And all the conversation is Joe Andreesson going to get to play in this football game? There wasn't a lot of food there for me to be like, I got to like do some study on this guy. And then he played and he started, and he was playing against starters and was not in over his head, as I said a second ago, and it makes the tackle on the running back after shedding a block from an NFL offensive lineman, sheds the block and then gets stiff armed in the face and makes the tackle on the running back anyway, which is
a good running back.
Yeah. Which is something that great linebackers in this league can't always do.
Yeah.
And then he continues and stays in the game, plays, and he actually gets pulled for another guy down on the depth chart. And from that moment on, it was all the ways that I could potentially figure out how to like eliminate him. Well, he's a camp story. It's a great, his size is off. And then I'm checking his size. He's exactly the same size as just about every other linebacker on this football team. It's like, well, yeah. Size isn't going to do it. Is he not strong enough? I guess he pumped 32 reps at 225 on the bench, which is a big thing, a big strength tester. Like, his RAS scores, I guess, were really, really good, which speaks to your comment about like, how does the NFL miss on a guy like this? And who knows, maybe there's just wasn't a lot of guys get caught or get seen because NFL scouts go to a college to look at somebody else, and then they see that guy and it's like, oh, that guy is intriguing. Right. And then they start digging. Who knows? I don't watch UB football. Maybe there was nobody there. All of that to basically say this: at this point in time, everybody in Buffalo and even outside of Buffalo is going to be watching this game on Saturday to find out what the only story, the starters aren't playing Saturday. So what? Is Joe Andreesson going to play? Because that's what I want to see. Like, is there literally a Cinderella story in the making? Is this kid, if he does what he did on Saturday, this Saturday, I don't know how he isn't on the roster of this football team and isn't right behind Terrell Bernard. What do you do if he is as good as he seems, not advertised, as he is shown in a game against Russell Wilson, right? And I mean, not that Russell Wilson's great, but you know what I'm saying, right?
Absolutely.
He wasn't playing against Mitch Trubisky.
Right. He wasn't playing. This didn't happen in the fourth quarter. You know what I mean? This was the start of a game against NFL starters. This is going to sound cheesy and maybe corny, but I'm going to say it anyway. Fate could be a funny thing, man. Yeah. Because look, the weather, I don't know if Terrell Bernard plays or not. Maybe he doesn't play anyway because, you already lost Milano this week. But they played all their other starters with the exception of Josh. And Josh only did not play because of the weather.
Kincaid.
Correct. Yep. But most of the starters played.
Yeah.
I don't know if the weather, they didn't want to take a chance with Terrell Bernard. So you have the weather be a factor. Then you also have Bale Inspector, who continues to be hurt. If Bale Inspector's healthy, we're probably not having a Joe Andreesson conversation right now, because Bale Inspector is going to be out there with the ones. So it takes the weather and Bernard being held out for whatever the reason, whether just precautionary, Bale Inspector being hurt, to get an opportunity to start. I feel like there's a lot of situations in sports and in life too, where it's all about opportunity and fate. Like, the stars just align a certain way. If Joe Andreesson is on the Dallas Cowboys and he don't get that opportunity, you never hear from him. He probably is one of the first cuts, but you get that opportunity. And then, to his credit, he answered the bell. He answered the bell as good as you could possibly answer a bell when an opportunity arises.
He has film at this point, which is the most important thing for these guys in these training camps and these preseasons. He's got film, and he's got film that speaks volumes loudly at this point from one game. Now, can he back it up? That's going to be the question. Can he do it again? And does he make this roster, or at least put himself in a position where if he does get cut by the Bills, he doesn't sneak back to the practice squad, right? That somebody else picks him up. But that's a question too. So if he does get potentially claimed by somebody else, he's going to have the option to be like, no, I want to stay in Buffalo. Like, if I'm going to go to the practice squad for the Redskins, I'd rather stay in the practice squad in Buffalo. So, I mean, we'll see, right? So I guess if he gets
wild, it's wild. Week 3 of the preseason, we're leading off pretty much with the Joe Andreesson conversation to me, and it's awesome, and I'm here for it. I love it.
It's compelling.
By the way, and Ingram. By the way, you could also add Ingram to the list of former UB kids who have kind of who are in the NFL now with the Buffalo Bills. I originally had Andreesson as one of my 10 guys on the bubble, still do in a way, but learning again on Monday the news about Bale Inspector, who's still going to be out week to week. I think that really cements this kid's chances of making this team. And also, to your point, film. He
Yeah.
already put a game on film. There's got to be a GM out there right now that says, they cut this dude. He's going to be on my team. And he's got another game with film. Now, look, he can go out against Carolina, make a bunch of mistakes, and be a disaster.
Yeah.
But short of that happening, I'm tempted to say that Joe Andreesson is not even a bubble player anymore because of what he's doing, and also not just the Milano, but also the Balin Spector, who's
Yep.
Terrell Bernard's backup injuries. I'm tempted to say this guy's not even, he's barely on the bubble at this point.
Well, if he comes out and has half of the game that he had against the Steelers, which would still be a great game by all terms in every conversation, who are you safer putting on the practice squad, Balin Spector or Joe Andreesson?
Yeah.
In my opinion, you're putting Balin Spector on the practice squad. He's not getting gobbled up by somebody else.
Yeah. I got to learn before I speak on it too much what the IR rule is. I know you can put two guys on IR at any time who can come back. You could put them on IR tomorrow. Like, say, if they were to put Matt Milano on the IR tomorrow, two guys, and they could come back. Other guys have to make the initial 53-man roster. Then you could put them on IR. So there might be some guys who get, and they would be veterans who don't have to go through waivers. Like, I know they've done it with Reed Ferguson, like, seemingly every year. A paper transaction cut. Sam Martin might be one of those guys who won't even go on waivers, because I think at least some of these injuries, Quinn and Morris, MVS, some of these guys you might want on your initial 53, and then you're going to put them on, 24 hours later, you move them to IR. So there might be some funky initial cuts on this roster, but sticking with roster bubble players. All right, so that's one. Another one, and this, again, changed on Monday. I originally had, when I sent you notes, I had MBS on the roster bubble. The neck injury obviously hurts him. He's going to be out multiple weeks. He was among that first group too. So, I mean, it was pretty definitive that he's going to be out multiple weeks, not even necessarily a week-to-week thing. I had him on the bubble to begin with because, on one hand, he's got a proven track record, also guaranteed money, which does matter, and he has performed better in the playoffs. I felt that the Bills needed to keep 6 receivers for him to be on this team, though, because if he's your 5th receiver, he doesn't bring anything to special teams.
Yeah.
And so that was a concern of mine while I'm on the bubble. And quite frankly, I just kind of expected more from him since joining the Bills through camp in the preseason.
I think this is a fate situation. I think you talked about it with Joe Andreesson, and I think this is the opposite version of fate, in the sense of, not that MVS is going to not make this football team, but due to other injuries and the emergence of, in my opinion, Daquan Hardy, who also had a very, very good football game on Saturday, not only returning kicks and punts, and yes, I know he ran into his own end zone, but he did come back out again, which is what you hope for. But he played well. He played well even at the corner spot. He contested a lot of passes. Like, he was solid. He was flashing. He was there. I think a guy like, where I'm going with all this, a guy like Daquan Hardy, if his return skills are what we want them to be as a rookie that the Bills drafted, and he's a corner, which the Bills are thin at, it pushes KJ Hamler and potentially Terrell Shavers off this roster, which allows MVS, who has film and NFL, like, he's got, not legacy is the wrong word, but he's got time in the league, because the Bills, as we talked about at the top of the show, they don't have a situation in quarterback, and they're not going to in this game either, to be able to properly evaluate any of these wide receivers. Even if MVS could play, MVS not playing is probably the best thing that could happen to him, because in their mind, they think they know what they've got in MVS. Oh, he's been to Super Bowls. He's played with Aaron Rodgers. He's played with Pat Mahomes. Like, we know what we're going to get from this guy. And if we don't know, we can call GMs and have Josh call quarterbacks and being like, tell me about MVS. Oh, you want this guy in your football team. In my opinion, Daquan Hardy, I think, pushes Terrell Shavers and KJ Hamler potentially off this roster.
I would say this: Daquan Hardy on Saturday got himself off my bubble list. Yeah. He's not on this list. I thought I saw enough from him between the punt returns, especially, but also doing some pretty good things at corner. I think he's on this roster.
But think about your 6th wide receiver, not named MVS. So your 5th wide receiver. Why are you keeping him? You're keeping him for special teams. Yeah. Well, if Daquan Hardy's the guy, you don't need him at this point. And you're bringing one of those guys back to the practice squad. More than likely Terrell Shavers. The question is Justin Shorter, right? So is Justin Shorter is a guy that I would think would be on the practice squad. So that it's going to be, not that he would make the roster. I'm not saying Justin Shorter would make the roster. There's going to be some interesting stuff, but how do they evaluate any of these people?
Yeah. Well, put it this way, it's going to be a pretty wild 10 days, in
Yeah.
part because of the injuries, because
Yeah.
I feel like with Justin Shorter, I don't even have him on my roster bubble list. I don't think he's making the team.
Probably not.
I think he's going to be on the practice squad. Nobody's going to pick him up. I don't think on the
Nope.
53 man. So I
Nope.
think you could easily get him there. Now, I agree with you. And I liked your take, by the way, about MVS. This might be a blessing in disguise, not
Yep.
him being hurt. That shit sucks.
No.
But him being hurt could allow him to initially make this team, okay?
Mhm.
Then get put on IR. Now he's on IR for the first 4 weeks of the season, and you get a really good chance to really evaluate like what you have in Keon Coleman,
Right.
how he's looking, if he's going to be able to be a positive impact on this offense, or if he's going to be one of those rookies who develops really slow, which does happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Matt Collins, who knows offensively what he's going to be. So
He's making the team.
yeah.
Matt Collins is making the team.
Oh, absolutely. He's making the team. He's starting. I think he's going to start ahead of Keon Coleman to start the year.
He
But
might.
anyway, it's
He
like,
might.
so you could have MBS ultimately end up on IR now and give him time to evaluate. When somebody gets hurt, there's a direct beneficiary to it.
Yeah.
It sucks, but that's reality. That's the business.
Yep.
We've talked about Shavers a little bit. I think Tyrell Shavers, who I do have on my list of roster bubble guys, I do think he's a direct beneficiary to this.
Mhm.
Now, he had a good camp early on. He's made a name for himself. He's quieted down some. He's a special team standout. He did have 2 penalties, though, on Saturday, which is not good for him. My question was, is he a guy that you could waive and get to the practice squad? And I say yes to that. But, all right, so MVS is out. And we know who the top 4 receivers are. Even if they only keep 5, who's the 5th? And in Claypool, it's not MVS, because MVS probably is going to be on IR, I would guess, at this point of the season. Shavers might be that, even if they only keep 5. Tyrell Shavers might have that inside track right now to be in the 5th receiver.
Yeah, when I was saying KJ Hamler and Shavers, I wasn't saying that they're definitely gone. That isn't what I was saying. I was just saying there's your options. You're not keeping one of those guys for return. I mean, maybe he's a backup returner. It's going to be interesting. I mean, obviously, we thought all the way coming into this, it was Shakir Coleman, Samuel Hollins, Valdez-Scantling, and potentially Claypool. And it was like, who's going to unseat Chase Claypool? Well, Chase Claypool's toe unseated himself. But to your point, one of these guys is going to potentially sneak in, and who's it going to be? I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Valdez-Scantling has a neck sprain. He could be fine in 3 weeks. I mean, he could be absolutely fine, or it could be the route that you said. They keep him on the roster, they put him on 4-week IR, and then one of these other guys, or both those guys, could potentially sneak on. Right? It just kind of depends. But I don't have the answer. It might be shaping up that they keep 5 wide receivers, and then they put. To me, you're talking about Shavers, who is another undrafted guy, if I'm not mistaken, and Shorter. Like, they're going to want to keep those guys that have been in the system for a while, in my opinion. I think they like KJ Hamler, but it's a what have you done for me lately situation. And what did he do for them lately? Well, against the Bears, he dropped a pass and muffed a punt. So, right.
Well, put it this way, dude. For people who say that the preseason means absolutely nothing, tell that to KJ Hamler. All right. Because guess who returned 5 punts on Saturday? It was Hardy. He got all 5 of them. They didn't even split it up. Hardy got every look.
And all the kickoff returns too, right? Didn't he all the kickoff returns?
Yep. So don't tell me that preseason doesn't mean anything. All right. So I'm going to get to a break now. But before that, we were talking about a Hollywood story, or a Cinderella story, I should say, with Andreesson that turns out to be real. I got another guy in this list where I thought until today, actually earlier today, where he was a nice little camp story, but he was just going to go away. I have him on my bubble, but now I think he may make this team. Be right back. Talk about him and plenty more after this break. All right, I am back with my good friend Joe Miller from Overreaction Buffalo. We're going to talk a little Overreaction Buffalo here in a few minutes. The network that he is doing, Jerry Ostrowski, John Fina, 2 former Bills. I love that you have actual former players on your shows. I just think it brings another element that you really don't get anywhere else. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But anyway, a player that I have on the bubble that a week ago, I'm like, I don't think he's going to make this football team, but he was a nice camp story. But now the injury, Quinton Morris, potential significant injury. In fact, they're talking about further evaluation. He could be a guy that could end up being out long-term with his shoulder injury. Zach Davidson.
Oh, yeah.
Zach Davidson, I had him on the wrong side of the bubble initially because I'm like, he just doesn't have any special teams value. And if he's going to be on the roster, he's got to be on the field and he's got to play. And you got Knox and you got Kincaid. But then I'm like, the Bills are going to run, if they run enough 12 personnel, which I think they're going to, it's potentially, it's feasible that they could want 4 tight ends on the roster, on the active roster. Maybe they go shorter at receiver or linebacker or defensive line, something like that, to have that extra tight end. Plus, he's looked pretty good.
Yeah.
I think he's flashed enough at camp in the preseason to maybe if you try to expose him to waivers, he may get claimed by somebody. So I think he's somebody who's on the roster bubble, but a couple days ago, I might have had him on the outside of it. Now I think I might have him on the inside of it, especially in light of a potential significant injury to Quentin Morris. This may be a guy who makes his football team.
Yeah, I actually felt like he was going to make the practice squad. This was weeks ago when we did our way too early kind of like roster projections.
Yeah.
I felt like there was a situation where a potential, and I was more than likely wrong, but what do we do as content creators? We bring up topics and things like the outside chances that might have possibilities. Is it probable? Maybe not. Or is it going to happen? No, but is it probable? Whatever. To me, the Bills want to run 2. Well, they've got 2 stud tight ends. Now, one of them gets injured somewhat often in Dawson Knox, but there was an idea to me that the Bills could sneak on back then 3 weeks ago before camp started, sneak on an extra safety, an extra linebacker, an extra wide receiver, to your point, by letting Quentin Morris go and keeping Anderson on the actual like practice squad. So slipping him through so that if one of the other 2 tight ends got injured, then you've got that guy in the practice squad. Because what the Bills like to do, even with 12 personnel, they like to bring in a 6th tackle, right? Since Lee Smith has been gone, they bring in that extra offensive lineman to effectively run the ball. They don't really use tight ends to block necessarily, but it's going to be interesting to see. Everything I've heard from camp, you've gone a bunch of times. Again, in the games, there's really not much to evaluate him on. He ran a couple good routes on Saturday, but I don't know that there's enough film there for somebody to grab him and put him on their active roster. So then it's going to turn into what other practice squad invites does he get if they cut him? And then does he want to stay in Buffalo, which I think you do, right? I mean, when you're talking about culture and Josh Allen and the guys around you, I think you want to be here. I like him. I haven't seen enough from him to know anything outside of what everybody told us. However, everybody also told us that Terrell Shavers was the man. and then lo and behold, the first depth chart comes out and he's like not number 1 in anything. And we haven't seen much of him outside of a couple penalties. So,
we were talking about fate a few minutes ago with the opportunity for Joe Andreesson. I think it may be fate that we're recording this podcast when we're doing it, because literally just seconds ago, Tom Pelissero, I believe from Fox, or I'm not sure where he's from. I probably should give him
NFL Network.
A proper credit. Yeah, NFL Network. Anyway, he just reported that the Bills are signing quarterback Anthony Brown.
Okay. Yep. There you go.
That is a surprise. He played with the Baltimore Ravens. He appeared in 2 games in 2022. Did not play a snap last year. Was signed by the Raiders this offseason, and he was just released a couple of days ago. I don't know what to think of that. Here's what I think. Josh Allen better not get hurt, man. I don't even know what to tell you at that point. If that's their plan for QB2 right now, I don't know. Maybe he takes. Maybe he's on the practice squad instead of Ben DiNucci, and they're still searching for a QB2 out there. I'm not going to really.
This sounds to me like we need somebody to hand the ball off on Saturday. And then when Kyle Allen is cut.
See, I wanted to overreact.
Buffalo Bill.
See, I wanted to overreact. They said, yeah, maybe Ben DiNucci's arm's going to get tired from handing the ball off to Darrington Evans and Frank Gore Jr. 75 times in the stadium on Saturday against the Carolina Panthers, which, by the way, I said this on Twitter too. If you're going to go pay money to go watch him hand the ball off 47 times on Saturday, you are a real Buffalo Bills fan.
Time out. The Bills got me on the price of those tickets about 6 months ago, so I've already paid for them. So the question is can I get somebody else to pay me for them? The answer is no. I probably can't even give these tickets away, right?
Yeah.
So.
I got to, again, real time, this literally just happened. I'm going to give the Bills a benefit of the doubt. I don't think Anthony Brown is their targeted number 2, but who the hell knows? I don't know what this team is doing anymore, personnel-wise. We'll find out. Let's continue, by the way. A guy on my roster bubble is Leal Collins. He's another one. He's a veteran. I really wanted to have him cemented on this team. He's proven himself earlier in his career anyway. And he's a veteran on an offensive line that really doesn't have a lot of veteran proven depth right now. But I got to tell you this, and I'm no offensive line guy. I'm not Joe Marino. I'm not one of the dudes from Cover One that watches all 22 film and talks about pinning and pulling and all this stuff. Now, I know you got a couple guys on your show who could probably speak a hell of a lot better.
I don't talk
most.
about it. I just ask questions.
Yeah, I'm sure John and Jerry got plenty to offer on the offensive line. I do not. But here's what I do know. Leal Collins, from what I've seen, camp and a little bit in preseason, has been a disaster. I mean, he has been awful. The goal, I think, was for him to be that guard/tackle, and he's just too slow. They've already stopped. They've already pretty much given up, and he's not playing any snaps anymore.
He played Saturday. He was with the second team on Saturday, if I'm not mistaken.
But I think he was playing guard the whole time.
He was playing guard. That is absolutely
that's
true.
what I'm saying. He's not playing tackle anymore. He's just too slow. He can't move. Maybe there's a reason why this guy was, not to be a jerk, but maybe there's a reason why he didn't play last year. You know what I mean? I got him. Anyway, long story short here, I got him on the roster bubble. I don't think he's going to make this team. I know the Bills would love to have a veteran like him as a backup on this line. I just don't think he's that guy. He's not going to make this team, but I got him on the bubble.
Yeah, so yes, I would say. I mean, the Bills traditionally bring in that veteran dude that they end up, and we're like, oh, that's the guy, and then they cut him, right? So, I can tell you, Jerry Ostrowski yesterday on the Overreaction postgame show was talking about that he likes the rookies that they have, like Grable specifically. So it wouldn't surprise me if the Bills hang on to one or two of those rookies that they've got that they drafted. You're just praying to God nobody gets hurt. Right. Hopefully this starting five, that's just where the Bills are going to be in 2024, probably except for on defense. On offense, you're praying to God nobody gets hurt, and then defense, you just expect Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich to patchwork this thing together and make it work just like they did last year. Right. So Matt Milano gets hurt. Daquan Jones gets hurt. We go on a 7 game win streak. The defense just is what it is. You lose one of these offensive linemen, you lose one of these wide receivers. I mean, running back, we're probably okay, right? I mean, if James Cook gets hurt, Ray Davis looked great Saturday. If in the world that we're talking about 2025, if Josh Allen sustains a real injury,
of course,
an injury that keeps him out. He's had 2 real injuries of which he did not come out of the game. If he sustains a real injury, but so.
I would, last year, look, you had David Edwards' depth. You had Ryan Bates' depth. So all 5 guys played all 17 games, which was awesome. But even if they didn't, you had some decent quality depth
behind them. Yep.
You might rely on Vandemart and Gable or SVP even possibly as center. I'm just telling you, Leal Collins is not going to be one of those guys. So I have him on my roster bubble on being nice. Will Clapp's another one too, and all the offensive linemen.
VPG is going to be the guy that's.
You think so?
Yeah,
all right.
for sure.
All right. Well, we don't really need to discuss.
That's 7. I mean, you're talking if a Grable and VPG stick, right? That's 7 right there. So you're talking about 8 or 9. So who's left? Apparently, we've been all pronouncing it wrong. Is it Vandemark or Van Demark? Because Josh Allen has said Van Demark several times.
I don't even know
in interviews, but yeah. So Alec
I hope I don't have to learn, because if I do, that probably means Spencer Brown or Deion Dawkins is hurt. Really, 100%. I don't even want to really learn definitively. Look, I have half this list almost was linebacker. I think safety because of the injuries and linebacker in part because of the injuries are the biggest question marks. I'm just going to run off. I got 3 linebackers in a row here on my list. Deion Jones. I got Nicholas Morrow, and I got the rookie, Edifon Olufosio. All on my roster bubble. Let me explain briefly. With Deion Jones, he's a veteran. He's been a starter and a pretty good starter, too, at times.
Pro Bowler as well. In 2017, he was a Pro Bowler.
Yeah. So, I mean, I also looked at special teams. When you get to roster bubble battles, you better look at special teams. I noticed that Deion Jones played 13 snaps on special teams against Pittsburgh. But, it's been an uneventful, he was hurt for a while too, but an uneventful signing. The Bills signed him in May after the draft. Like I said, he's got 91 starts in this league. So that's probably going to matter, especially Balen Spector always seeming to get hurt. But I have him on the bubble. I don't think he's a lock to make this team. Nicholas Morrow, this was one of the Bills' first free agent signings. I mean, they signed this guy early in March.
He was considered a special teamer, though, right? Wasn't he the guy that they were talking about?
I thought Morrow, it felt like he was their target to be like the Tyrell Dodson replacement. But your best ability is availability, Joe. And he's missed almost all of OTA's camp season. He's got like a groin/core injury.
Right.
95 tackles, 3 sacks this year with the Eagles, although he was awful apparently in pass defense. I can't tell you how many Philadelphia Eagles fans were so happy to see
Same.
this guy leave
Same.
because of
Yep.
that. But anyway, he seems, especially with the injuries, a bubble guy because he can't stay healthy.
Yep.
And then the last one is Olafosio, the rookie. I'm saying it like this. I'm basing this on the summer only. The only thing he's got going for him is that he's a 5th round pick.
Yeah,
Now,
he,
again,
in my opinion, he makes the team for that reason alone.
yes.
Like Morrow's not going to make this roster because he hasn't been healthy, right? So I mean, it's in my, and I love the fact that Coach still can't say his last name, and Eddie's still hurt. Like the
Yeah.
fact that he pauses every time, then he goes, Eddie.
He played 10 special team snaps on Pittsburgh. Like I said, when you get to this part of the roster, you look at stuff like that. He played late into the game.
Yep.
Put it this way. The UB kid is clearly surpassed him on the depth chart.
Sure.
Yeah, I think, but you got to look at it this way too. Let's just say if you're afraid that Morrow or Jones, you want to cut one or both those guys, maybe because they're veterans, that it's possible, it's plausible that somebody else could pluck them. Are you going to pluck a 5th round rookie who's done absolutely nothing in camp in the preseason?
Put on your active roster.
Put him on your 53-man roster.
You're not.
That's why I think the Bills might be able to get away if they were to waive him and still get him on the practice squad to start this season. Or, like I said, some of these guys who won't have to be subject to waivers. Like, I don't think Deion Jones would be subject to waivers at this point.
Right.
They might cut him and then bring him right back the next day. But anyway, you can only have so many linebackers. Let's kind of talk our way through this real quick here in real time. All right, so Bernard and Williams are definitely your starters. That's
yes.
That's
and
a given.
the Bills still have Matt Milano listed as their second starting.
And he won't, but he'll obviously he's going to go on IR when the time is right for that. So you got 2 linebackers. Do you keep 5 or 6? That's the question. They could keep 5. They could keep 6. If they keep 5, you got the UB boy. You got Morrow, you got Jones, you got Olafosio. That's 6 right there.
Yep.
Don't know that all of them are making this roster. And I'm not even counting Balen Spector, by the way. If Balen Spector gets healthy, he probably makes his team because he's a backup Mike, and he's a good special teams player too. So how close is he to coming? I don't know. But I think it's fair to put all those guys on the roster bubble. Morrow, Jones, Olafosio. I don't think any of them are locks to make this team, and I don't think any of them are locks to not make this team.
Yeah, you're probably looking at a cut and sign situation, depending on who gets cut from other teams, right? So the Bills are going to keep 5 or 6 of these guys just to fill out the roster, and then you're probably going to hear a day or two later that the Bills have cut, right? Potentially not Dorian Williams, but like Nicholas Morrow and signed a dude that got cut from someplace else, right?
Sure.
To put on the active roster. Because this is by far and away, as much as safety is thin, they've at least got some quality guys there that are just injured. The question marks in the linebacker group is and hopefully Joe Andreesson is removing one of those question marks. But the question marks in this group, we need Bernard and Williams to stay healthy all season long. They've got to stay healthy all season long, because if they don't, Bobby Babich has some work in front of him.
Terrell Bernard has become one of the most 3 or 4 important players on the Buffalo Bills this year.
Bubble wrapped. He was bubble wrapped on Saturday. Him, Kincaid, Allen, and I think Curtis Samuel was bubble wrapped as well. Otherwise, that toe stuff would have come out before the game, and I don't. So
I'm not saying you're wrong, but I will say I found it curious last week where they gave him on last Monday, and I pay attention to this shit. He had a veteran rest day on Monday.
Yep, he
did. Groin/veteran rest day. Then he went to Pittsburgh and in practice. I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. Then he didn't play on Saturday. Weather, like, all right, I get that.
Yep.
To find out Monday, it's turf toe, it's week to week. My radar's up at least a little bit when it comes to Curtis Samuel.
Yeah.
You said it, man. About 10 minutes ago. This is a team that cannot afford injuries anywhere on offense, except maybe running back. They can withstand an injury, but
I'm even confident with Frank Gore Jr. at this point, toting the rock behind that offensive line. Like, he looks good. He's tiny, but he looks good.
We're looking at potentially at least a Bills opening week where the top 3 receivers that are available is going to be Khalil Shakir, which I like him. And then after that, Keon Coleman and Mac Hollins.
Yes, that's probably
your 3 best receivers. That's a little worrisome. Good thing, by the way, good thing they're playing Arizona. Good thing they're playing Arizona. And let me ask you this too, while we're talking about Arizona real quick. If these injuries all these week-to-week injuries. Let's just say they harvest themselves for 3 to 4 weeks here. Maybe it's the way the schedule is constructed. So they play Arizona in week 1, then they got to go to Miami week 2 on a short week too. So if they don't play week 1, you don't even have a real practice in week 2 before you got to play Thursday night. So if you don't play week 1, you're probably not going to play week 2 as well.
Right.
But then you get 10 days before week 3. If you're a Buffalo Bills fan right now and you split the first 2 games, you beat Arizona, but you go to Miami and you lose, I'll take it.
Yep. Well,
it's a little premature with the way the injury situation is right now. I'm saying
the first half of this roster, if we didn't have any injuries, is brutal. Or the first half of the first half of the schedule, not the roster. The first half of the schedule is brutal, even if we didn't have any injuries. So, to me, the schedule makers, and I said this when the schedule came out, the schedule makers basically set up drama galore. They set this season up for the Bills to have a tough early half, and the Dolphins to have a cake early half. And the Bills have a cake late half, and the Dolphins have a tough early half. They literally want the Bills to run down the Dolphins again. That's
it might happen.
That's what they've done. They've not scripted in the sense of they know who's going to win and lose, but they've scripted this season to be set up for the Bills to chase down the Dolphins one more time.
I got one more guy on my initial roster bubble list that I submitted to you earlier today, but I'm going to pull him off it now. And it was Mike Edwards. I'm pulling him off for 2 reasons. Number one, because he's closer to getting back.
Yeah.
He's going to be limited this week, doing some individual stuff, some drills. Although I've heard he's still got a little bit to go before he can actually play. By the way, also Cole Bishop, same deal with him this week, which is good news, obviously, for the Bills. So that's half the reason why I want to pull him off the bubble list. And the other one is Damar Hamlin now is hurt, and he's going to be out. He's a week-to-week guy. So I think he's safe. I liked him with Kansas City, man. He was the likely starter on this team, but the shoulder injury, the spring, the groin or the hamstring, I should say, now is really sidelined him. And I also looked at it this way. You talked about Hardy, and I couldn't agree with you more. He's making this team.
Oh, yeah.
The Bills are keeping 6 corners.
Oh, yeah.
Benford, Douglas, Taron Johnson, Elam, Ingram, Hardy. That's
Lewis.
6 corners.
You don't think Lewis is making it?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, okay. Did you say Lewis? Did you say Cam Lewis? I didn't think you said.
No, I didn't say Cam Lewis because I still could. I'm putting him with the safeties. I got
gotcha. My bad. Yeah. My bad.
So if you go Benford, Douglas, Johnson, Elam, Ingram, Hardy, there's your 6 corners.
Yes.
Which if you keep 6, I think there's a good chance you keep 4 safeties.
Yep.
Rapp's obviously making this team. Bishop's obviously going to be on this team, and Cam Lewis is definitely going to be on this team. That's 3 right now. So if you're only keeping 4 safeties, to me, it's Damar Hamlin, Mike Edwards.
Yep.
This is the dilemma. You know what? I just talked myself right back out of it again. He is on the roster bubble. Well, no, because Rapp, Bishop, and Cam Lewis are making this team. So that's 9 DBs.
For sure.
You're going to keep 10 DBs. If you keep 10 DBs, which I think is very realistic.
Oh, yeah.
You don't got room for Hamlin and Mike Edwards.
They could. This is an area where they could shave a roster spot at wide receiver. They could go with 5. They could go, as I said, with 2 tight ends, and they could shave a spot to keep an extra guy as well. So this is one, especially knowing last year, back half of the season, they played a bunch of dime because they didn't have all the guys at linebacker that they wanted to have. So they shored up. Now, obviously, Jordan Poyer's not on this football team either, who was a tackling machine even at 400 years old last year. But yeah,
I'd have to look at the last time the Bills kept 11 DBs. I'm not saying it could be recent. I don't know.
I don't think it's been any time in the recent future, but I think this is a different situation.
It must be because if you're keeping 10 DBs, and I'm pretty much set in stone. I don't think there's any positional battles going or roster battles at corner. I think there's 6 as there's 6.
Yeah.
So if you're keeping 4 safeties, I don't think you got room for Hamlin and Mike Edwards. So you know what? In real time, I might have just thrown inadvertently Damar Hamlin on the roster bubble right now.
Damar Hamlin is on the bubble. He is on the bubble.
I think so. I did not have him on there, but I'm going to put him there right now. One last question too. Let's just say Edwards and Bishop get back slower than Sean McDermott's happy with. You're talking now we're in little inside 3 weeks. It was absurd to talk about it a couple of weeks ago, but now you're within 3 weeks. Let's just say 10 days go by and Hamlin's still out because he's going to be a week-to-week guy. So that's going to happen.
Right.
And let's say Edwards or Bishop, neither of them are back on the field practicing 100%. And you got 10 days now before the regular season. This is a realistic possibility that I'm painting here, by the way. This is not fantasy land. This is real. So let's say that's the situation. Bishop or Mike Edwards, neither of them might not be healthy week 1. You're 10 days out. Is Micah Hyde in play realistically? Because I'm starting to think yes.
I don't think yet. I don't think he is yet. And maybe, I mean, right. So it's You've got to go back to the press conferences of which it would, not currently on the roster, not currently with us. Like the way that has been phrased about Mike, nobody has said isn't on this team, isn't on the team anymore. Nobody has phrased it that way. So the expectation for me is he's coming back at some point, unless the Bills strike gold at the safety that they didn't know that they had and don't need him. But I don't think it's week one. I don't think he's suiting up week one. I don't think so.
Well, I want to say no, but I think he might have to out of necessity. If we paint the picture. All right, well, let's paint that picture. Let's paint the picture. DeMar Hamlin is week to week. Again, we have a game in 19 days. The Bills have a game in 19 days. DeMar Hamlin's week to week with a hamstring, by the way. So you could count on that being 3 weeks. We've seen Mike Edwards, it's been 4.5 weeks now with his hamstring or whatever it's been. Edwards, Bishop, 10 days out. Neither of them look like they're going to be ready to go week one. You're going to have Cam Lewis as your only other option to start. So
I think that's what they do. I think they do Taylor Rapp and Cam Lewis. I think that's who they start. And then they keep some of these other guys on the backside, and then they put the other dudes on IR, temporary IR. But I mean, that's the other thing too. I didn't mean to cut you off, Pat. I'm sorry.
No.
But that's now you're talking about being without Mike Edwards and Cole Bishop for 4 weeks, which I don't know that Cole Bishop, even when he gets healthy, is ready to come in, play professional football.
I hate this position.
Outside of Milano is not the most unfortunate injury. Cole Bishop is the most unfortunate injury on this roster because when he gets healthy, and any of us who have separated a shoulder, and I've separated my right one twice, there's nothing about it that's fun. And there's you're uncomfortable for weeks. And then it's a matter of he's got to learn to trust it, hitting people, and he's got to get acclimated to NFL speed. He's got the uphill climb for Cole Bishop.
And he's
you might find Cole Bishop signed to the active roster and put on season-ending IR for his shoulder.
Really?
And if that's the case, you might see Micah Hyde.
I really hope it doesn't come to that. Well, we got to see how his shoulder responds. He's doing drills this week, but you know what? I saw him on the last day at camp. He was doing he was riding a bike and doing a little bit of things lightly with his feet. Anyway,
the Bills have done stuff like this before, though. What I just said is not wildly abnormal. The Bills have done where we've all been like, wait a minute, they put him on season-ending IR. They did it to Shorter last year. Right? They were like, oh, yep, you're done for the season. They've done it to a ton of guys, and for ankles and weird things. And I mean, Cole Bishop's injury as a safety shoulder is a big deal. I mean, how can he get his arm above his head without pain? I don't know.
We talk all the time. However, I haven't had you on the podcast since everything went down with the Buffalo Rumblings podcast network.
Vox Media, yep.
Vox Media.
VOX, Vox Media, yep.
Talk a little bit about your initial feelings when you learned that news and how quickly you came to the decision of what you wanted to do, which, of course, as we all know now, is Overreaction Buffalo, and that you kept both John Fina and Jerry Ostrowski, with you as part of your crew, which I think is obviously a brilliant idea because I've said this many times. You know what? We on varying levels, we're all smart football people, but to have two guys who, I'm sitting here talking about Leal Collins, I feel like John or Jerry might be just a wee bit more qualified to talk about how he's playing than someone like myself, you, or quite frankly, anybody out there who talks Buffalo Bills in the media. But kind of talk about your initial feelings when this all went down and how long it took you to decide ultimately what you wanted to do.
Yeah, so it's a long story. There's many, many layers to it. Overreaction started with me in 2019. It went to Fanatics and then went to Rumblings right after that. And whirlwind kind of take off as far as that goes. Growth. And then all of a sudden the growth kind of stopped. And I had been toying with the idea, and this isn't a secret to you, and I've talked about it. I'd been toying with the idea of either quitting or going out on my own for about a year and a half before the whole thing went down with Rumblings. As all through this, John Fina, which I did the off tackle with John Fina show, John Fina was asking me, and had been for a couple of years, how do we grow this thing? How do we keep growing this thing? How do we keep growing this thing? So there was interest, and even he would say, is there enough opportunity there for us to break out on our own? And I was like, I'm not sure. I mean, it's hard to break away from a monster like Vox Media, SB Nation, and Buffalo Rumblings. So I was just whatever. And then it got to the end of last season, and I had let some powers that be know that I was most likely done at Rumblings. Like I'm probably done. At that point in time, conversations began to happen between me and John and I, because obviously John didn't want to quit his show. It was going to be a where's the show going to go type of a situation if it doesn't land at Overreaction. Jerry kind of got brought into the conversation a little bit, and there was a very cool synergy between the three of us, just having conversations around this idea of doing Overreaction together, the three of us together, and like going daily 30 minutes, 35 minutes versus super long shows and all that kind of stuff. The formats we'd always done, which you're also very versed in that. And then the off season was the off season. Everybody's kind of recouping, yada, yada, yada. And then April 4th, I think, was the day that Vox Media announced that, that basically we were all done. Not Rumblings, every pod, like, and they just turned it off, wouldn't give the RSS feeds to anybody. Nobody got there. So like the biggest podcasts out there for Vox Media all turned off, everybody gone. And it was, I sent a nasty gram because I was upset with the way that they handled it from a leadership standpoint.
Terrible way to handle that.
Of which they didn't respond to me, and I'm not surprised by that. Anyways, as soon as that happened, Jerry and John were like, we got to go immediately. I was in Arizona at the time for work, and they were like, as soon as you get back, we got to go live. Like, we got to go. So since then, we kind of made a commitment, kind of had an idea and a plan through the off season, 3 shows a week. And then with the idea of going to 6 shows a week when the season started, which we've ramped up, we built a website, overreactionbuffalo.com, which is a very unique website in as much as that it has all of our content, which if you like it, great. If you don't like it, there's still something there for you. But all of our content is there, and it doesn't take over the website, but also all the Bills press. It pulls in all the Bills press conferences. It pulls in a bunch of special media, and there's a tab on there called Bills on the Wire that literally aggregates and pulls in every national media article to the website. So I used to go to ESPN.com, and then I go to NFL.com, and I'd go to FoxSports.com, and I click on the Bills tabs and every one of them. Now you just go to Bills on the Wire and you bookmark that page, and all of it's right there. Now we're working on getting the local stuff there. The local stuff is a little more challenging just because of subscriptions. Buffalo News has a subscription and stuff like that. But every national media outlet, if the word Bills is mentioned in an article, it shows up on that website, which is cool. So we had a lot of cool stuff going on. We've seen a lot of growth. It's happening fast. We wish we were growing a little bit faster.
Now you've partnered up though, correct?
Yes, we are thirds at this point. So Overreaction Buffalo is now me, John, and Jerry thirds. Yep.
Yeah. And talk a little bit, like the pros and cons. Say when you're with Vox Media, a big company, and there's obviously pros to it, the exposure, just being part of a website where thousands of people literally are going to Buffalo Rumblings every single day. So it's just a better chance people are going to stumble on your podcast. Even if they don't want to, they're going to see it. Yeah. Whereas you don't necessarily have that when you're on your own. But when you're on your own and doing it the way you're doing it now too, you kind of get that sense. Do you get that sense that you're in control of everything? Like right now, like it's kind of a partnership between, it's like you, Anthony, Bruce, guys, Sarah, so many people, I love and respect these people, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like you're on this day and this and that. And there's kind of a little bit of a partnership going on. This is all now. If you screw up, you do something dumb on your show, that's on you. You know what I'm saying? So, but like you're kind of, well, not just you, but you, Jerry, John, guys are calling the shots right now. It's different.
For sure. It's definitely different. I would say it's better and worse. It would be potentially worse if in 2023 Rumblings had promoted the podcast stuff more, which they didn't, which led to us not growing. So people were going to the website and there wasn't really a whole lot of podcast activity. Whereas in years past, there was a lot of promotion of the podcast and articles about the podcast and stuff like that, which is why the website for overreactionbuffalo.com was so important, because you can't do any type of searching for a Buffalo Bills podcast without a website to tag back to. So yes, there's a lot more responsibility on us. However, you and I have talked about this. We have a shared responsibility. So the cool thing about what we have is at any given time, any one of us could do one of the shows. So as much as Jerry Ostrowski has the Big O show on Thursdays, if Jerry can't do his show, John Fina or I could potentially fill in for his show. Whereas for you, if you can't be available, there's no show, right? So, I mean, it's all of the weight is on you. Whereas for the three of us, it's very much a shared responsibility, which as much as we're doing more shows, it's a relief. Like I don't feel the grind as much having partners that are just so if I can't make a post-game show, fine, John and Jerry will do it. If I can't make on the beat. Jerry will do it, right? So it's there's, I don't know. I'm a little more in control of my own destiny.
You are.
We're building our brand versus building somebody else's brand.
That's
There's a
what
lot
I'm talking about.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. You
I
know,
like
Alder.
that. And everything
You
you
know
said
Alder.
is right with me, but if I get sick or something happens, I can't do a show. There is no show that day. You're right, and that's accurate. However, I am a control freak and an egomaniac, and I don't want anyone else telling me what my show is going to be or who's my
Right.
guest going to be. What are we going to
Right.
talk about? I say, hey, Joe, you got some free time? Can you do my show? And hopefully,
You've been that way since I met
ask,
you. You've been that way since I met you too. That
yeah,
was the
and I'm
first
not
thing
going
you
to
told
change
me.
either.
Yep.
Look, man, all due respect to a lot of these great networks out there that have a really good roster and a really good lineup of shows. I ain't trying to be part of that though, man. If I can't,
Right.
never say never. I'm never going to say never. But right now, my feeling is if I can't have my own thing and be in control of my own destiny, sink or swim on my own, then I'm not going to do it. Now, I am part of a network, shout out Blue Wire Network, but they don't tell me none. You know what I mean? They've been great. They pay me when I'm supposed to get paid, which is always a pretty good thing. But you know what I'm saying? They don't say, oh, you can't have this on your show. You can't do this. So they're my boss technically because they pay me,
but
I'm
really
employed by them, but it doesn't feel that way.
That's the biggest thing right now is we went from making money doing podcasting, not tons, but making money to literally it's now costing us money.
Yeah. You go through that phase.
The assist listens aren't there. What is an assist listen? So when you're on a network with Bruce and me, who had great numbers, there's a lot like all of us work together and we're all like, so there's an aspect of like people are listening to my show and they're listening to this show and they're listening to that show and they're listening to that show and that show and then they get my show. So like we're all like everybody's kind of like working together. And right now it's just us. So yeah, the growth is good. It's way beyond what I expected it to be. But I would like it to be about 10x.
Well, business stuff aside here, nobody really gives a shit except you and I about the business side of it. But from a content perspective, again, I really like what you do. I think it's important, and I don't think it can be overstated when you have two people that you're working with who have played in the NFL, not just a cup of coffee in the NFL. Like lots of people have podcasts and they might have had a cup of coffee in the NFL. All due respect to them, it's amazing that they would ever get to that point. But John Fina, the first player in franchise history to get a franchise tag, and Jerry Strosky, who had a long, decorated career with the Buffalo Bills, to have those guys be in the trenches and be able to talk about things, it does. And I know you don't like to talk about this once, you don't brag on it, so I'll kind of do it a little bit for you. But when you tune into the offer, just an example, like the Jerry O Show or Off Tackle with John Fina, you're going to get perspective from somebody who for an example, he's talking about, let's just pick a player, Spencer Brown. All right. So he's talking about Spencer Brown doing something. I'm sure when John's talking about it, John is envisioning himself out there in that kind of situation, being on the field against an NFL edge rusher or whatever that scenario is. He has perspective that you're not going to be able to get from somewhere else, because the only way you can offer that perspective is to have played the game at the level that those guys do. And that just gives you an opportunity to cover things in a way that I don't think anyone else can.
Yeah, there's a layer that gets peeled back from, hey, I know a lot about football and I've been educated on football versus I played in the NFL for 11 years, which John Cena
that's
did.
What I'm saying.
And Jerry Ostrowski, who was an undrafted guy and got cut 3 times and then ended up landing on the Bills roster for 9 years. And Joe Marino pointed this out. And I don't know who does this type of research, but Joe Marino made the statement that Jerry Ostrowski might be the only NFL offensive lineman to ever play significant snaps at 4 different positions on the offensive line of an NFL team. Like he's played center, right guard, left guard, and right tackle. And there's Joe Marino was like, I don't know anybody that's ever done that before. And Jerry Ostrowski is an unheralded and kind of unsung, like he's not a name like Reuben Brown that everybody knows, right? I mean, Jerry, and he knows his stuff and he's good on the microphone. He actually did a radio show in Tulsa for a long time.
He had experience too. Yeah,
super good. And they're both just super genuine dudes. They're not full of themselves, and they're not too big for their britches. They're Bills fans at this point, and they're loving the acceptance into the mafia. And I don't know how to say it. And you've seen it. You've hung out with them, so like they just want to be fans and hang out with the fans and root for the Bills too. So they're right there, and it's I don't know, dude. I'm just riding coattails at this point.
That's the last thing I want to bring up too, because you're right. I've gotten to know John and Jerry through the years a little bit, and I have spent some time with them, especially John. And there's a level of authenticity to them when they're out. And we all went to Resurgence. You had me meet you guys out there not too long ago. You guys were at Resurgence, and they really truly do. They genuinely love interacting with Bills fans. And it's not bullshit either. It's not for the cameras. There are no cameras. You know what I mean? So they could be pricks if they wanted to. And trust me when I tell you, I've come across many current and former athletes that if the camera's on them, if they know they're being watched, they're super cool. But if they're not, it's like, I really don't got time for you.
That's right.
John almost to a fault, because once he gets going, he's like a volcano, man, or you ain't stopping him once he gets going. I almost broke my back, by the way, a couple of weeks ago when he hugged me. But in all seriousness, man, those guys love talking football.
Yes.
And they genuinely love, to your point, being a part of Bill's Mafia. It's sincere, it's authentic, and it's not bullshit at all. They're not just trying to drive numbers by pretending to be nice to people.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, and it's like I said, I'm just riding coattails at this point. So I had the opportunity, unbeknownst to me, to build somewhat of a brand, the Overreaction brand, and I invited those guys to be a part of it, and it's just a lot of fun. It's awesome.
I'm very much looking forward to the season when the games actually matter and they start, and checking in with all you guys and hearing your perspective from that as well. If you're not following Joe on Twitter, make sure you do that at Joe Miller Wired. Check out Overreaction Buffalo. It's overreactionbuffalo.com too. That's the website, correct?
And yes, overreactionbuffalo.com, and any social media platform is just Overreaction Buff. So TikTok, Instagram, whatever, Twitter, X, Overreaction Buff. Yeah.
All right, buddy. Thanks for having you on. Always a pleasure having Joe Miller on the show. All right, guys, and I'll be back, brand new episode. I'll be solo tomorrow, and then, like I said, Wednesday night, live from Imperial Pizza, Spectrum Sports, Andy Young. Talk to you guys then.